You ever have one of those moments where you think, well, that escalated fast? That was me, smack in the middle of our neighborhood barbecue trying to mind my own business when suddenly, bam, chaos. I mean, 1 minute I'm talking to Mike about weekend fishing, flipping a burger, totally relaxed, just soaking up the suburban good vibes. And the next thing I know, Karen Thompson. Yeah, the Karen, our self-declared HOA queen, is reaching across the damn picnic table. Eyes wild, and before I even register what's happening, she snatches my Rolex Submariner clean off my wrist, holding it up in front of everybody like she'd just bagged Bigfoot. And the look on her face, God, I'll never forget it. Like she'd finally exposed the neighborhood's biggest scandal. She actually shouted, "I'm going to show everyone what a fake looks like." People were gasping, and right then and there, a guy I barely knew, Tom, who turned out to be an off-duty cop just trying to enjoy his cheeseburger, stood up slow, wiped his mouth, and called in his buddies. Not even 5 minutes later, Karen, surrounded by 3 uniformed officers, her hand stuck mid-air, still clutching my watch like a trophy. But now her face had gone from smug to sickly pale. Let me back up a sec, because honestly, if you'd told me a month ago my biggest worry would be barbecue drama and not my job, I'd have laughed you out of the backyard. But our HOA had sent out those cheesy invites for the annual community cookout. And don't judge me, I was actually looking forward to it. The food's usually solid, the beer's cold, and I like seeing the neighbors when we're not just awkwardly waving from our driveways. Karen. Yeah, she's always a piece of work, but I figured if I kept my head down, she'd focus her crazy elsewhere. Anyway, I decided to wear my Rolex that day, my one real splurge. A limited edition. Submariner I saved for years to get after landing that big promotion. To me, it's a reminder that hard work sometimes pays off, you know. But the second I step into the community center yard, I spot Karen over by the registration table wearing her power polo with the HOA logo clipboard, clutched like it's the Constitution, already giving me that squinty glare. I swear her eyes locked on my wrist like a laser, like she was sniffing out trouble, and sure enough, within 2 minutes, she's whispering to her sidekick, Margaret, both of them looking at me like I'm public enemy number 1. See, Karen's always acted like the world's tiniest cop, measuring grass with a ruler, peering through mailboxes, giving Amazon drivers the 3rd degree. I guess to her, my watch was just another threat to her perfectly managed fiefdom. About an hour in, as I'm talking to Mike about nothing in particular, she sidles up, flashes that phony smile, and loud enough for everyone around to hear, goes, "Well, that's certainly an interesting watch you've got there. Looks expensive." She dragged out looks just enough so everyone caught her drift. Now I could feel the temperature drop about 10 degrees. Mike shifted from foot to foot, probably wishing he was anywhere else, but I just smiled and thanked her, thinking that'd be the end of it. Oh no. Karen spent the rest of the afternoon dropping concerns about how certain people might be flaunting things that don't belong in a modest neighborhood like ours, how fake luxury items were everywhere these days, and how it's not fair to the rest of us working stiffs. You know what I mean? It was like death by 1,000 cuts. She never actually accused me directly, just performed for the crowd. The real show started once the grill master called everyone over for the big round of burgers and dogs. Karen planted herself in the middle of the crowd, waited for things to quiet down, and then, with the whole neighborhood listening, announced she had serious suspicions about counterfeits being paraded at our event. I could feel 40 pairs of eyes land on me. Karen's voice went up a notch as she lectured about all the ways people buy fake luxury watches to look impressive, and how that was, in her words, misleading the community. I'd never seen people look so uncomfortable at a barbecue. Honestly, I thought old Mrs. Newman was going to choke on her coleslaw. When Karen finally paused for breath, I just told her calmly but loud enough for everyone to hear that my watch was real and that I had the paperwork if she wanted to see it. But that was just fuel for her fire. She announced, "Documentation can be faked as easily as watches. The only way to know for sure is to have it checked by an expert." The next thing I knew, her hand shot out, and before I could move, she'd undone the clasp and snatched the damn thing right off me. Total silence. Nobody even moved. Karen held the Rolex up like some kind of evidence exhibit, crowing that she'd take it to a jeweler and prove I was a fraud. I was too stunned to be mad at first. Then the anger hit and I said, "Give it back, Karen. Now." But she just grinned and started lecturing the group about how, as HOA president, it was her duty to investigate. She actually tried to tell me I should be grateful for her concern. At this point, the crowd was splitting, some neighbors looking mortified, a few kind of intrigued, but everyone glued to the drama. Karen waved my watch around, jabbering about what made it obviously fake, pointing at details she clearly didn't understand. That's when Tom, quiet, never-involved Tom, put down his plate and stepped right up, his badge in his wallet, calm as anything. He said, "Karen, you need to give that watch back right now. You just committed theft and there are witnesses." The way Karen's face changed, you'd have thought someone poured ice water down her shirt. She tried to argue about her authority and how she was protecting the community, but Tom wasn't having it. He explained slow and steady that being HOA president doesn't give you the right to take someone's stuff ever. Karen dug in her heels, still clinging to my watch, mumbling about fraud prevention until Tom called for backup. That snapped her out of her trance, but it was too late. 2 squad cars showed up fast. I think word got out that something wild was happening at our barbecue because suddenly everyone was out on the grass watching the whole mess go down. Sergeant Williams, this big guy with a gentle way about him, took statements from the neighbors. Every single one said the same thing. Karen grabbed the watch. Nobody gave her permission, and no, they'd never seen anything like it. Karen tried to charm her way out of it, talking about misunderstandings and just doing her job, but the officers shut her down quick. Sergeant Williams explained that it didn't matter what her intentions were. Theft is theft, especially when the item's worth more than $12,000. When he told her it was a felony, Karen looked like she might faint. She started pleading, promising to hand it back if everyone just forgot the whole thing ever happened. But you can't unring that bell. He told me the decision was mine. Did I want to press charges? I didn't even hesitate. Karen had humiliated me in front of everyone, made me look like a liar, and stolen something I'd worked my ass off to buy. I told them to do what they had to do. Watching her face when the handcuffs snapped shut, man, you could practically see her whole empire crumble. Still protesting, still mumbling about community, but nobody was buying it. The officers photographed my watch as evidence, handed it back with this kind of reverent look. I guess they don't see a lot of limited edition submariners in suburbia, and then led Karen away. Neighbors started buzzing. Some people couldn't look me in the eye. Others came over with awkward apologies, and a few just shook their heads like, "You know, we always knew she was nuts, but yeah, that happened." Afterward, everything moved quick. Karen got charged with felony theft and let out on bail, but the fallout was brutal. The board called an emergency meeting. No surprise, they voted to boot her out as president. It was honestly kind of sad watching Margaret, her lieutenant, clear out the HOA office like she'd just survived a natural disaster. But the wildest part, the court date. Karen lawyered up, showed up looking like someone had stolen her puppy, and tried to explain herself to the judge. I brought every bit of paperwork, every receipt, even the original certificate from Rolex. Not only was the watch real, turns out it was one of only 500 ever made, which made the whole thing even more serious. Prosecutors nearly choked when they saw the appraised value. The judge didn't buy a word of Karen's speech about community protection. He sentenced her to 6 months in jail, 3 years probation, and a pile of fines and restitution that probably made her wish she'd just minded her own business. Watching her stand there, face drained of color as the sentence came down, I didn't feel victorious. Just done. Like I'd survived something ridiculous, and maybe the neighborhood had too. People still talk about it. Some think Karen was just doing her job. Others say she finally got what she deserved. What do you think? Was I right to press charges, or did it go too far? Sometimes I wonder if there's ever really a right side when community and power trips collide. But I know one thing, nobody's touching my wrist at the barbecue again. So, let's hear it. Where do you stand on this whole mess? Was justice served, or did things get out of hand? Drop your thoughts below because I guarantee this neighborhood debate isn't over yet.